Hello and welcome to this very special edition of For Your Consideration. Now, I am joined obviously today by a man who needs no introductions, but in case he does, I will then do them. So I am joined by Seth Skorkowsky, who is a published author, a phenomenal GM, and of course someone who runs his very own YouTube channel and gives you amazing advice on, well, basically being a great GM. So, Seth, thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir. So this is part of that interview series that we were doing earlier on in the channel, where, of course, I spoke to Mr. Taresk, Mr. T, about his experiences in role-playing. And today I'm talking to Seth primarily about how and the processes therefore and thereto and therein he managed to get to becoming a fully published author. And not just with one book, with how many books is it now? If I do a quick count, it's what, 6 books plus a whole lot of anthologies, is that right?
It's 4 novels and then 2 collections and then some short stories and various different anthologies.
Right, absolutely. And the novels are broken up into the Damoren series, is that right?
Damoren's the first in the Valducan series.
Right.
And the 4 novels are all in that series. And then I have a pulpy sword-and-sorcery thief series that's just short stories. And that's compiled into 2 collections.
Mountain of Daggers and Sea of Quills.
Yeah, and they're kind of like the old Conans or any of Fawford and Grey Mauser, where it's just a bunch of shorts put together in a book.
Perfect. Lovely. Absolutely fantastic. And then the Valducan series, that's available in audio as well, isn't it?
Yes. Actually, the 4th book we did as an Audible original. So until August, it's only going to be in audio. But
right. And then people maybe later on will be able to pick up a copy of those.
Mm-hmm. But our audio editions for the first 2 novels in that series did extremely well. And they were Audio Award finalists. That's kind of the Oscars of audiobooks, as they call it. So they really wanted that as an Audible original for the 4th one, and I said sure.
Sure, absolutely. Lovely. Fantastic. And to give the viewers a little bit of a backstory on the Valducan, it's quite an interesting what is it called? Sort of, it's like a fantasy noir modern day. What's the official term?
Well, the accepted term is called urban fantasy.
Right.
The official term is contemporary fantasy, but that doesn't sound as hip as urban fantasy. Then so we all call it that, except urban fantasy is supposed to take place in a city environment, while contemporary just means modern day. So I say urban fantasy because it sounds a lot cooler than contemporary.
Absolutely. And it's about it's about a character who picks up a holy weapon and goes hunting demons and monsters and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Is that right? I mean, I'm just sort of melting down your amazing work into like a basic sentence. I mean, it's terrible, absolutely terrible.
Well, actually, when you have to pitch the book, you have to do that yourself. So I'm... Yeah, right. Or the back cover blurb, you got to get that whole book down at like 2 sentences. Yeah, it's about a demon hunter who uses basically a magic revolver, or a magic sentient revolver.
Right, and that's for me is the interesting part. Magic sentient revolver, and those weapons have got a long history as well of being reforged and sort of reborn, if you like, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they all have a lineage, and each book in the series centers around a different weapon that's used by the hero. So I change protagonists out of different people in the same group of monster hunters. So, right. So the second book, one of the sidekicks is now the hero, and the next book, another person's the hero. But you usually know them all from the very beginning.
Right, which is absolutely fantastic. So if you haven't read any of Seth's books, I suggest you go and find them. Seth, can we get them on Amazon and the usual kind of places?
Yeah, usual places, Amazon, Audible, different websites, Smashwords, all those. They're all out there.
Perfect. And we'll put those links on our website as well. If you go through to our store, you'll see that they're there. And I'll put them below in the comments as well. So, all right. So Seth, you've got these novels under your belt. Are you writing more?
I have a finished novel that I'm trying to query to a publisher right now, which is a horribly long and painful process of getting rejected a lot. So I have an entirely new project, contemporary fantasy, I suppose, that I am trying to pitch to an agent at the moment. But anything else I'm working on, I've got one novel series that I started, I'm not sure yet. And then I actually just got a gig writing my first RPG scenario to publish. So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that was this week.
Oh, really? Oh, well, yeah. Congratulations. That's lovely. That's lovely. And I mean, something that you do on your channel is these reviews of modules. I was suckered into your review of the Two-Headed Serpent, that Cthulhu module. I didn't watch part one, I'll confess. I didn't watch part one. I was just looking at, in my stream, everyone who's uploaded stuff recently, and I thought, well, I'm chatting to you today. I usually watch your videos on how to be a good GM, and I thought, well, Two-Headed Serpent Cthulhu, and I've just finished a convention actually on Sunday where I ran a Cthulhu module, so I thought, well, let's have a watch. And I looked at the duration, it's 20 minutes long. I thought, well, I don't know this module, and I don't run modules personally, but let me have a look anyway. 20 minutes later, I went, oh my God, I finished watching this whole thing. I have no idea about this module, but I want to play it now because there's stuff going on in Borneo, and there's this and there's that. But the way that you do your videos is just so engaging. That green screen effect. I mean, you in a dress is priceless. If you haven't watched it, that alone is worth watching. So I really enjoy that content. So I'm glad that you're writing a module now because you review everyone else's. All right. So if we now get to the actual interview itself, for everyone at home. So in terms of your transition, what was the moment where you decided, you know what, I'm going to write a book, and what kept you going? Because I know that I've got about 400,000 or 500,000 drafts of chapter 1 of various books on my hard drives and things, which over the years I've started and then just never kind of finished. What got you committed to your writing?
Well, when I was younger, I used to write a lot of stories, and then I guess the teenage years kicked in, and I discovered girls and punk rock music, and I kind of stopped writing for a while. And then after I graduated college, I got my first grown-up job, and I moved away from all my friends. Well, about 20 miles, so long enough that I couldn't just pop over and see them. So out of boredom, I guess, is what started me back into writing, is just something to do. But how I stuck to it is I gave myself a deadline of 1 chapter a month. And kind of come hell or high water, I did 1 chapter a month. So it didn't have to specify how long of a chapter, but there must be that much. And I stuck to it so militantly that if it was near the end of the month and I hadn't done it yet, I would cancel plans with people just to finish my chapter. But if it was the middle of the month and I finished it, it was like, you have a vacation. You're like,
right.
Like, now I can go see everybody. That responsibility is off my shoulders. So like, even when, I got married and we went off and had our honeymoon, I still did a chapter that month.
Right.
It was a little one. And that was really the trick that got me through it. Because otherwise, you hit that little moment of just kind of writer's block or frustration or just procrastination. And I've had a ton of writing friends that have, they put it down for a little bit, and then it's 6 years later, and I'm like, hey, are we ever going to finish that book you were working on? So
right, absolutely correct. So it was just that regimen of creating a chapter a month, which I know it doesn't sound like it's a daunting task, but I can imagine that it's as you say, as that end of month started to loom, you suddenly realize, hang on a moment, you've got to finish. So that's fantastic. Now, how did you then take it to the next level? Because I know as game masters, as narrators, as storytellers, as dungeon masters, all of us have got stories that we tell. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why we do the job. But how did you then take it to the next step? So you finished your first novel, which was Damoren, is that correct? You started with Damoren, yeah.
Oh, no, no. My first novel is an unpublishable piece of crap.
Aha. Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, all right. So that was the first one. It's unpublishable. Is that by your own admission, or is that by 50,000 rejection letters? I mean,
Both.
oh,
Uh, so, well, how it happened was, so I wrote the first book, which of course it's fantasy, which means it had to be a series because by law you have to make a series.
right.
And I'm about, so that was 114,000 words. Then I was about 70,000 words into the second book, and I just wasn't able to sell that first one. And I ended up going to a writing workshop at a local convention that actually got guilted into doing this writing workshop because a friend of mine was helping put on the convention, and she's like, "You need to join the writing workshop." And I was like, "Fine, whatever." And that was chaired by a gentleman named Lou Anders, who was the head editor of Pure Books at the time, and he had just won the Hugo Award like a month prior. So this is the industry rock star. And I spent 3 days with this group of people locked in a room with Lou, and he told me, "This is a really great first novel because it taught you how to write, and that's the only thing it's good for. You can put it aside now and start a new book." And he actually said that in a way that I left really happy, because it was like this weight was off my shoulders.
Right.
Because deep down I thought, this is probably a bad book, but I had him confirm it. And the next week I started Damoren. So, but it took me about a novel and a half before I actually started chapter 1 of my first published book. So,
right. And okay, so that's a lesson in cold water to begin with, and I think that's fantastic. I think it's a wonderful lesson, and for me, it resonates very, very deeply. I don't write books. I used to write screenplays in an alternate life in a different country, and the very first screenplay I wrote was in screenplays you talk about page numbers. So if you have 120 pages, so theoretically it's a 120-minute movie. You sort of talk about a minute a page. And the first screenplay that I wrote in a very short space of time, because there was a production house that said, if you give us a script it was in 3 weeks, I think, we will look at making it. So I wrote it in that 3-week pressure period and gave it to them, and they read it and they went, "This is absolutely crap, but you have now finished writing your first screenplay." And after that, to then write the second one was easier because you kind of know the journey that you're going to go on. Mm-hmm. So it's less daunting, I suppose. Did you find that as well, that for Damoren?
Well, with Damoren, a little bit. The book after that, a little bit more. And kind of at this point, I know my system. It's like, for me, the hardest part of the entire process is the 60 to 75% mark. I can usually slam through the first half of it and get up to it's actually a screenplay term, the point of no return, where you have the peak action usually right in the middle. I can knock through that, and then that next 25% will be over half my writing time, if not more. And then once I get past, about 75 to 80%, it's all downhill from there, and I can fly through that. But where I spend most of the book is that like 15 to 20%, where it's like, well, crap, now I have to make all this work. And I know that. I know that when I start the book. I know that as I get closer, I'll tell my wife, I'm like, well, I'm at that part, and she'll just nod because she's listened to me lament for years that is where I suddenly go, this isn't going to work. This is crap. I have to start over.
Aha. Okay. So, I mean, I know there's questions beforehand, but I'm going to deviate there based on that. So when you are plotting out your book, do you do that almost as if you are plotting out an adventure within your role playing, insofar as you say, okay, so these are my characters, and this is the big bad, and this is the journey they're going to go on, or is it more organic insofar as you have basic idea and you sort of follow where the characters are going, and that's why when you get to this sort of 20% section, you're kind of going, well, the main plot needs to be tweaked because it's this or that. So how does that evolve? How does that come about?
With Damoren, I had certain scenes that I wanted, and I actually had two separate introductions to the book. I didn't know which chapter one to do, so I used them both. So if you pick it up, chapter one should be called a prologue, but nobody likes prologues anymore, so we just called it chapter one, and that's like 14 years ago. And then chapter two starts, and that was the other introduction of the book. I wasn't sure which one I'd wanted to go with. And then I had about 5 scenes throughout the book that I really wanted to do. I could see them very clearly in my head. I had no idea who these people were. I had no idea what they were doing. I had just some weird concepts. And so I got back from this writing workshop with Lou Anders, and we went over how to craft the opening 10 pages to make it draw you in. So I knocked out chapter one. The original draft was exactly 10 pages on the nose, and then I'm like, well, okay, I'll start chapter two because I know kind of how that'll work. But I don't know how that will end. By the time it ended, I knew how it would end, and it was just kind of building as I go. And I guess about the time I got about 40% done with the book, I knew what the book would be about. And then I went back and I cleaned it all up, but not much. It worked out very cleanly. But then the second book, my editor wanted an outline before they agreed to it, and I had never done full outline before. And so I had to throw one of those together, which was weird. And I stuck to that outline about 95%. I did have one point in it where I'm like, yeah, I have no idea why my character would even do that. That doesn't make sense. This doesn't work now. And I told my editor, it's like, well, I strayed a little here, and he was like, oh, whatever, I don't care. He wanted to know that I at least thought about and had a story before they agreed to it. So, and then so I kind of do a combination. It just depends on the book of which method I go with. But I'm more of an organic author. And it's usually me just trying to figure out how these little cool points that I came up with work into the story, as I'm basically building bridges between cool scenes.
Right. It was absolutely valid and absolutely fantastic, because so often you get these authors saying, oh, I started with a character first, and that was always given to me as you have to start with the character, forget about the scenes, it's got to be the character. And that just irritated me because it's not how I think either. So all right, so just very, very quickly, an outline is what, a 10 to 12 page sort of summary of the whole book, is that right?
4 or 5. I mean, it's really, really condensed. You don't mention anyone but main characters, so you might have 4 characters most named in an outline. After that, it's just and company. It's kind of bare bones, but you go through, there's just kind of the highlights of every chapter up to the end.
Right.
And, so there might be subplots that you just, you leave them out of your outline. That doesn't matter. But it just kind of shows the framework of how the story will flow. Because, the timing of the story and the flow of the story is kind of critical. Which you would understand. This feels like it's been really long, but it's only been like 5 minutes. And it's like, well, because you got to get that pacing right. And you want to have the everything goes wrong scene, happen at the right time, and then it's all exciting after that. So but yeah, about 4 or 5 pages. Nothing big. It's easy to say that if you're not asked to write one right now. And it's the longest thing in the world.
Now, how you primarily what systems do you GM? Are you sort of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, Pathfinder, Cthulhu, 13th World?
I started with D&D, just like almost everyone. It is the gateway drug, and I started actually with 1st edition, and I was a militant 1st/2nd edition game master for a long time. The third edition came out. We played it. I hated it. We actually turned the campaign into like realigning the world right, and then we converted to the second edition as the the finale, and then we switched to a new campaign. And then on the side, I would play Cyberpunk 2020 because I love that system. I like its mechanics. I always wanted to have a dedicated Mech Warrior campaign. That has always been the one that got away.
Right.
I've mapped it out. I've made characters. I've run test games, but I've never had my massive Mech Warrior, Aerotech, BattleTech crossover, game. Then we played D&D 5th edition when that came out. We played a couple systems and kind of a homegrown edition for a few years of just using the Cyberpunk Interlock system. A couple random games here and there. Then I started Call of Cthulhu when 7th edition was released. So I bought it the day the PDF came out, and that was the first time I actually officially ran Call of Cthulhu versus reading the modules and stealing it and kind of forcing it to work into whatever other system I was doing, which was normally my MO. Was like, I'll read it and I'll steal the good parts and I'll just discard the husk.
Right,
so.
Absolutely, fantastic. And do you find that the role playing, does that influence your writing in any way? I mean, do you sometimes sit back with a scene that you need to write and go, actually, I'm just going to watch the scene and you sort of almost role play it out in your head? Do you ever do that? Or?
No, I have had scenes in games that have ended up in stories. But really, I have my control freak issues. I'm going to write that scene out the way it's really going to go. Versus if I hand it to the players would never ever do what you expect them to, and I would probably become this railroady bastard of like, no, you can't do it that way. So I will steal what they do correctly, but I'm never going to put them into my story to see if they can have it work out the way I want it to, because that will never, ever happen. Players deep down know at a subconscious level, and they reject the GM's plans. Do their own thing.
It's interesting. Players on a subconscious level reject the GM's plans. That sounds like a video topic on its own. Because yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. That's fantastic. That's lovely. So I like that. Now, Seth, when you're making your videos, as anyone who hasn't watched them, and I have not watched all of your videos, I will confess, but of the multitude that I have watched, you have these split personalities. Well, you have your players almost that you do these segues to, which are absolutely delightful. What inspired that? Was that just sort of your own players and that sort of thing? Is it just the way that you like to tell stories?
Yeah, it's a storytelling technique. It started with I do a series that I call RPG Philosophy, and that started with like the RPG Social Contract, and I need to record that video. That was my first video, and it is rough. Great material, rough video.
Right.
And one day I decided to do a kind of more of a humorous piece instead of anything serious, and it was over the 5 worst characters that good players make. And I wanted to do this scene that I have actually reenacted when I have kind of joked with this concept with people of we're going to play Vikings, and you got the player going, well, then I want to play an Arab poet, and this kind of back and forth. So I wanted to show that. So I made this character, and at the time I had really long hair, so I just let my hair down, put a baseball cap on backwards, master disguise. And I wanted a distinct voice, and the voice I stole from one of my players who did a character that talked in that kind of like, surfer voice, and I was like, okay, that's a distinct enough voice, I can do that. And I really enjoyed doing it, so it just kind of grew. And later I had a video that I wanted to have the player interacting with other players, so then I had to come up with 2 other players. None of them had names for the longest time. It was mostly people in comments were asking what their names were, and I'm like, it's player 1, player 2, and player 3. I don't know.
Right.
So they now have names. They have now become these distinct personalities. They have their own wardrobe of 25-cent mustaches and other
right
effects that I do.
Right. No, that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So I don't want to make it sound as if that's the reason why people should watch your channel. I mean, your content is absolutely fantastic. You're right on the money. How long have you been role-playing for? Just as a quick question. You said first edition, so that means that you've been role-playing since Noah. But how long have you been role-playing for?
I actually just hit 27 years.
27 years. That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
And I know that because on my 13th birthday, my mom got me the D&D box set, and it had a little adventure that you could game master yourself through with these little cards. Right. So technically, I was a game master in my very first game ever, and then I got taken under the wing by a friend's dad. Like a little bit later, played for a little bit, but so when I turned 40 at the beginning of this month, I could say it's like, well, it's been exactly 27 years that.
Good grief, that's fantastic. That's absolutely lovely. Absolutely lovely. Magic. Well, Seth, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your journey on writing. That's when we started to chat, I thought, well, I know certainly that a lot of people want to write. You've done it and are doing it and have done it very, very well as well. And I thought I'd sort of just get some insight into what your process is. And I think it's very, very liberating to hear that the way you go about it and I think that's absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And yeah, hopefully we can do some stuff together. If you want to see Seth and myself doing some stuff together, Seth does amazing role plays. I just wear silly clothing, so there's a little bit of an overlap there, but that's about it. Let us know in the comments below, because of course this is always about sharing thoughts and ideas and making sure that you guys are getting what you want to watch. As well as finding out stuff that we want to know about. So leave your comments below if you want to see anything like that happening. Seth, we can get your book on Amazon. What is your YouTube channel, please? What's the name?
It's just my name, Seth Skorkowsky, and that was it.
Right, perfect. I'll put that in the links below so you can go and find Seth's channel, subscribe, and find out all that there is to know that this wonderful gentleman here does, and look out for his characters, because I think Seth in a dress is possibly one of the best things I have seen all year. And yes, let's just say Cult of the Two-Headed Serpent should have an R18 rating because of what that female does on camera. I think it's absolutely shocking, but fantastic, Seth. Thank you so much, and thank you for watching. And until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.